Okay, we all know that Microsoft likes to make new controllers every now and then for each of its different machines. Obviously, the Xbox had its original controls, which got replaced with slightly more ergonomic controllers at one point. Ooh, and then the Xbox One had a couple of different iterations, mostly whether it had wires or not, and battery packs and not, and so on and so forth. And of course, the Xbox One has had its own variations. There's been at least two versions. And to be honest, I'm not actually a console player. I decided to sit out this particular iteration of consoles, this generation, because I just didn't feel like doing it anymore. I decided I would play on the PC a bit more, but the thing is, I still like a nice, comfortable, responsive joypad or controller, as the kids call them nowadays. In my day, it was a joypad. I still prefer that particular name over something as mundane as controller. But that's just me. What do you prefer to call it? You probably prefer to call it controller if you're of a certain age, and if you're like me of another certain age, you probably still call it joypad every now and then. But that said, regardless, Microsoft have provided their Xbox One controller for the PC, or indeed for the Xbox One itself. This is a wireless one, but it does have the option of a wire. All you do in that particular regard is you plug it into the top of the unit there, plug the other half into whatever you're using, whether it's the Xbox itself or your PC or some other compatible device, and you play on that way. Very little blurb on the back here, just elevate your game. Xbox controller with a 9-inch USB cable for wired gaming on Windows devices, features textured grip for enhanced comfort. More on that later, and then obviously all the other instructions again in English and other languages and so on and so forth, and then what you can use it for Windows and Xbox One. Let's just get the damn thing out of the box, shall we? As you can see, it's all sort of in one of those boxes that Xbox stuff tends to come in. It tends to be hinged so that you can sort of store things a bit more easily, and then you have the Xbox One controller itself. Identical in all regards, as far as I'm aware, to the regular one. It's got smaller directional analog sticks than the Xbox 360 did. The joypad doesn't have the full... Well, it does have the full... You can feel it rocking around behind. There's actually quite a satisfying clicking noise here. But, you can still do diagonally. It's just that you don't have access to the actual directional sections yourself now. That's all protected and covered, so to speak. I'm not exactly in love with the smallness of these D-pad sections here, these actual analog sticks, because I prefer a much wider baseline grip that you got on the old Xbox 360. It takes a little getting used to, but once you're used to it, you're used to it. Unfortunately, unlike some joypads that you can get, where you can screw these off and screw on different types, you don't get that option here, and there's nothing in the box to allow you any kind of options to turn these from... Is this concave? Or is this a different grip? Whatever this kind of grip is, that's what you're stuck with no matter what. There's probably third-party things that you can add on to make it a bit different, but there you go. And you've got your standard buttons here. The trigger grips feel a bit spongy, but having played with this a little bit, because this isn't one of my traditional reviews where I've actually just got out of the box for the first time, I have actually field tested this already and it works perfectly. The triggers here do feel a bit spongy, but they work. They are very responsive. They're at least as responsive as what you get on the Xbox 360 joypads. Same with the shoulder buttons here. These buttons are as responsive, if not slightly more responsive than what you got on the Xbox 360s. There was always at least every joypad I bought for the Xbox 360, at least one of the buttons, I think it was either the A or the X, would always sort of stick ever so slightly as if though the buttons hadn't been quite vacuum formed properly, and I'm not having that problem here. That was a problem that went away with time the more you press the buttons on the Xbox 360 joypad, but there you go. We've got your menu buttons here, we've got your Xbox logo button here to allow you to find whatever menus are available and so on and so forth. That would come up with that. You've got your remote access button here, you've got your micro USB port, and you've got your battery pack here as well. 2 AA batteries will suffice. I'm not entirely sure if this is rechargeable or not because I haven't bothered to read the instructions. Whoops. Because I don't actually have any intention of using this wirelessly, so I can't really comment on the wireless connectivity side of things. I had no problem using the wireless settings on the joypads that came with the Xbox 360, but I prefer a cable because that way you never run out of power. That's the biggest advantage of having a cable. It's also supposedly slightly faster using a cable than a wireless connection because the connections aren't getting interrupted, unless of course they come out. You can also see the connection points here. There's the microphone, and headset connection here, and I forget altogether what that's for. It looks a bit like USB, but it isn't, or if it is, it's a different kind of USB port, which I am not familiar with. Yeah, and this actually works quite nicely. Let's just put this to one side and bring the box back into play because there is other stuff inside, such as the USB cable. Now, one thing I will point out about this, which is very different from previous USB cables that I've had for joypad. Right, I've been having some camera problems today. For some reason it keeps cutting off after a few minutes, if not even seconds after that, so hopefully that won't be an issue this time. However, there is one slight problem I have with this USB cable, which is different from previous USB cables I've had for wired joypads that are meant for the PC and whatnot. There's no breakaway cable. Nothing like that whatsoever. On the Xbox 360 wired controller, you've got a breakaway cable. That might suggest that, you know, these USB ports aren't particularly solid connections, but they are actually quite solid. I mean, when you put this in here, okay, so provided you put it in the right way, because this is just a standard non-reversible USB grip, it is quite solidly in place. It's not going to come out by accident. You know, it's going to take a good bit of force to actually pull that out. And you don't need to have batteries in this when you are connecting it via the wire. It just pulls the power directly from your PC with no drawback on the PC's performance whatsoever. Beyond that, you've got your standard controller kind of peripherals warranty guide, which is quite a thick book. Might want to read that at some point, but not right now. Something to do with Anatel, I don't know what that is. And then the basic instructions themselves. I mean, it's fairly simple as far as pads and the controller devices are concerned. You just plug it in and you play, and it gives you instructions on how to do that with a laptop rather than a desktop, as well as the Xbox itself. So yeah, there we go. All quite nice, all the kind of Bluetooth kind of connections and so on. Is there anything on the back of here? No, it's all just one-sided stuff. Well, there we go. Now, I've played this on a few of the different games I've got on my PC, and I've got to be brutally honest, it works absolutely perfectly. I would say it's overall a bit more responsive than the Xbox 360 controller is. That's probably because it's more up to date, has better drivers and so on and so forth. But, you know, it's probably just something that they're supporting more than anything else. I will say this, so it claims that the grips are textured, and it is slightly textured. You know, there is a slight degree of texturedness going on that probably isn't going to show up in camera too well because the autofocus being a bit naff. But it doesn't really make that much of a noticeable difference. You can, if you're really looking for it, so to speak, you will notice it. But it just doesn't feel that noticeable. It doesn't seem to make that much of a difference overall. There are third-party things where you can just add grips on to give you a bit more padding and so on and so forth, so there is that. I will say it's not quite as comfortable as the Xbox 360 joypads were. It just doesn't feel quite as rounded. It's a bit more angular in certain regards. Now that might suit other people differently than me. I'm willing to put up with it, to be quite honest, because it's still quite a comfortable joypad in its own right. It's just not quite as comfortable as the Xbox 360. The only exception being that the triggers I do feel are more comfortable because of their more rounded, dedicated design. You know, they are designed more in line with what your fingers are supposed to actually feel like. So that works quite nicely for me. But I can hardly recommend this. If you're in the market for a joypad or a controller, whatever term you might prefer to use when it comes to PC gaming, then definitely give this a check. There are obviously more advanced models out there, some of which don't really work that well. From what I've seen and heard in some cases, there's at least one joypad that I bought myself which has completely given up the ghost because the buttons just don't have a good quality setting on them. They just sort of wore out after a few games. Yeah, well, after a few months of playing, that is. So, you know, some third parties just don't put the quality in. But this is a decent pad in its own right, and if you are just dedicated to playing on the Xbox One itself or any of its updated consoles, of which there seem to have been a few, yeah, you might very well want to look into this if you want to save on some on the cost of batteries all the time. Right, I'll leave it there. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.
Let's go.